class, and in today's episode we are going to get started with paginating messages in our chat room screen. Right now, as it stands, we are actually just fetching all of the messages that belong to a specific channel and dumping it into our chat room screen. And that is obviously a bad idea because you can imagine if we have about 10,000 messages that belongs to a specific channel and we're trying to fetch all of those 10,000 messages at once and pass and display them to our user, well, we're going to run into multiple issues. The first one is we're going to use a lot of our users' data, which we don't really need to do if we can paginate things. And the second bit is we're also going to run into memory issues from the operating system because we don't, there's really just a chance that we don't even have that much memory allocation available for us to be able to decode thousands of messages like that all at once. So here is what I mean. This is the current state of our project on the left simulator. If we jump to the channels tab and let's say we go into this channel, this group channel right here, as you can see, we have this long list of messages. I've gone right ahead and created a mock message and we have about 100 items right here. And we fetched all of these 100 items at once, right? That's obviously a problem. Now you can imagine if this is thousands of messages, which is usually the case when you have an actual chat application. This is really not sustainable and we need to do something better. So the completed version of the project is this simulator on the right side here. And if I jump into this, channel called Besties, watch how we slowly paginate things. And when I get to the top, I have this prompt that tells me to pull down. When I pull down, I get more messages, right? That is far more scalable and far more reusable than, fetching all of the messages at once. Using this kind of logic, we can, get historical messages or past messages inside of a channel by just continuously pulling down. And, in an actual application, this makes sense because if you're chatting with someone, it doesn't necessarily mean you want to go back and read the first message that they ever sent you. And so we're going to be focusing on handling that today. We've already done something similar, actually, guys. I don't know if you remember, inside of our message service where we're creating a, channel here, we're actually paginating as users. And we're going to just be doing the inverse of that inside of our chat room screen. And so here's what we're going to do. Let's jump into Xcode and let us jump into our message service and create a method that's going to be responsible for batching messages for us. So I'm going to go right ahead and Command-Shift-O, search for my message service file and jump into it. So inside of my message service file, I'm going to go and create a function just right down here that is going to be responsible for message pagination. And I'm just going to call it static function. I'm going to say get historical messages. Okay, I think that's a pretty good name. And this, method needs a couple of arguments or parameters. It needs to know which channel it's trying to paginate, right? It needs to know what's the last page in the channel. And also it needs to know the page size. And here's what I mean. If we jump into our Firebase real-time database console, right? This is our channel messages node. If we jump into this channel messages node, this is individual channels by their primary keys. If we jump into, like, for example, this channel right here, and we only have one message in this channel, but let's see if we can find a channel that has a lot of messages. Let's click on this. That just has 2. Okay, this one seems to have now. These all seem to have like very simple messages. I'm trying to, okay, this is perfect. So look at this. This one has about, I don't know, like dozens of messages, right? And what we need is we need to, just like we did with the user service, we need to get like the first 10 messages or the let's say we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we get to 10, right? This 10th message is what we're going to call a cursor, or you could call it the current page. That's the last place we stopped. So that means the next time when we go to our application and we pull down, we're going to use this last message that we stopped at to get the other new 10 messages. So then we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 again, and we're going to do that over and over and over again until we actually get to the last message, or in this case, the first message that we sent to our chat partner. So let's go back to our message service class and think about what we need. Well, we need a channel. So I'm going to say get historical messages for channel item, right? And we also need a last cursor, like I said, or you could call it a last page, but I'm just going to stick with the cursor terminology. And this is going to be optional. And why is this optional? Because the first item that we are actually going to fetch, so the initial fetch that we make, we're not actually going to have a cursor for that. So like, for example, let's say we jump right in here and we say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That first initial fetch, initial batch, we don't have a cursor for it because it's the first time that we are actually fetching the messages. But by the time we get to like right here, we know this is the last page that we are stopping. Okay. So that's why this is optional. That's why this last cursor string is going to be optional. We also need to know the page size, and I'm going to call this an integer or an unassigned int because it shouldn't go below 0. There really shouldn't be a negative number here. Why can't I find UI int? There we go. And the page size is just how many of this do we want to fetch at once? It's essentially what's our batch size. Do we want to fetch 3 messages every single time we pull down? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or do we want to fetch 10? So for now, let us just make it something. Let's just leave it as we're going to like specify this parameter inside of our chat room view model. The other thing we want is a completion, which means when we're done doing this computation, what do we want to get back? Well, if you guys remember inside of our user service, and I'll show you what I mean, I'll Command-Shift-O, search for our user service, jump into that user service, we have this concept of user node. I'm going to be using a very similar concept here, guys. And I'm just going to go right ahead and copy this user node, and I'm going to jump back to our message service. And the user node, instead of returning a message, like we could go right ahead and be like, oh, return an array of message items. right? But I would like for us to just wrap that into a neat abstraction, into a neat container you can think of it as. And so every single time we make a fetch, we're going to call it a message node. And it's just like the user node, right? It's going to contain an array of messages, which is going to be message item. And then it's going to contain a current cursor, which is what we just spoke about here, the last cursor, which is going to be an optional string. And it's going to have an empty node static property. So I'm going to change this to message node. And let's just say message node. And instead of users, it's going to be messages. And we are good to go. So now that we have this message node, we're going to return the message node when we are done with this get historical messages method, instead of just returning an array of messages, because this message node is also going to contain the current page that we stopped at, which is great, which is what this current cursor property is going to be holding. So we're going to go right ahead and write our completion handler. We're going to use the escaping closure syntax at escaping, because we're making a networking request and it's an asynchronous activity. So we're going to say message node, and we're going to return a void. All right, boys and girls, let's get into the meat and potatoes. I'm going to inline this really quickly before we start writing this specific logic. New line and new line. I think that looks pretty good. All right, so what do we need to do inside of this bad boy? Well, let us think for a second here. We need to get our Firebase real-time database node, and I think we're already doing that somewhere here, which is this node right here, which is the messages ref, the channel ID. And if we go back to our Firebase console, it's just this channel messages node. We need to go to this channel messages node, and we need to use the channel ID to access the list of messages that belongs to that channel. And here's how we're going to do that. I'm just going to say Firebase constants, right? And I'm going to say messages ref, and messages ref needs a channel ID. Again, it's this bad boy right here, this random identifier at the top, right? Those are the channel IDs, and each of these individual children here have a message ID. So we're going to get the channel ID, and how are we going to get the channel ID? Well, thankfully we're passing in a channel into our get historical messages method. So I'm just going to say channel.channel ID or .id. I think that's what we're calling it. Okay. So the next thing that I want us to do for the initial batch, all we got to do is just query. All we have to do here for the initial fetching. So the first time we actually get, let me go into our Xcode. So basically the completed version of the project, the first time we actually get into the chat room screen, this is the initial fetch, the initial batch. For that initial query, I am going to just say query limited to, let's see, we want to fetch the last, and we're going to pass in the page size. Okay. And I'm going to inline this because it just makes it look easier to read. And let's go right ahead and handle that initial fetch operation. So I'm going to call this query. I'm just going to say let query is equals to this. And actually, maybe I shouldn't inline this. Let's leave it as single line. And what do we want to do with query now? We just want to observe single events. I'm just going to say query.observe single events of value. And let's see, I'm going to get the main snapshot. And by the main snapshot, I'm just referring to, if we jump back to our Xcode console, I'm just referring to, we've gone into this, we went into this messages, we've gone into the channel ID, right? It's essentially like we're in this node. We went to the channel messages paths, we went to the channel ID. This is the snapshot, this right here. This entire random ID right here, and then all of those key value dictionary pairs. Because if you think about it, it's basically just a dictionary. This is the key. These are the values. And the values are also a dictionary. We have a key, we have a value. We have a key, we have a value. So hopefully that's helpful. And I'm just going to call this main snapshot. And let us go right ahead and return error here. And let's just print an error here and just say failed to get messages for channel. And let's go right ahead and put the channel name. We're just going to say channel.name. Okay. And let's see, what do we want to do next? So we need to, like I said, we need to like typecast these bad boys because we know they're dictionaries. But before we do that, because we're paginating, let's go right ahead and guess the first item. So I'm going to say godlet first is going to be equals to our main snapshot. And we want to get the children. And we want to get all the objects in the children and then the first item. And I'm going to cast that as a data snapshot. Okay. I also want to get all the objects. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to say let all objects. By all objects, I'm not referring to all the objects in the node. I'm referring to all the objects in this specific query. So which would be, for example, let's say we have page size of 10. I'm saying I want to get all 10 objects, okay? Because that's a good distinction to remember. So I'm going to say main snapshot, the children. Why is it not completing for me? The children, okay? Dot all objects. All objects. What am I doing wrong here? So I want to say let all objects is equals to main snapshot. And I want to get the children of my main snapshot, just like we did here. I want to get the all object. I'm just going to grab this, all objects. And I know all objects is going to be, like I said, an array of data snapshots. So I'm just saying, give me the array. Let me go here. Let me go back to channel messages here. I'm just saying something like, give me the array of these nodes that are collapsed right here, right? this is a key, this is a values, give me those arrays. And so that's what this all object is. So now with our data snapshot set up, it's saying there's no data snapshot. I'm going to fix that real quickly, but before we do anything, let us just return out of the scope. If for any reason the first object or all of the objects are empty, that means we don't even have any data to parse. So let's go right ahead, go up here and import Firebase. I believe that's why that is yelling at us. Let's say Firebase real-time, Firebase database. Okay, let's scroll down here and that should stop yelling at us. Let's cannot find type snapshot. Let me jump into our message service. What did we import up here? So we imported Firebase, we imported Firebase database Swift. I'm just going to copy all these modules, jump into our message service, and paste those bad boys right next to foundation. Okay, so let's scroll down to our method now, and let us get back to business. So the error is gone. That's perfect. So now we have access to all of the snapshots. We need to decode our messages now, and I'm just going to use compact map to get those. And if you don't know what compact map is, it's just a higher order function that helps us create an array out of a array. It's going to like flatten out an array for us. It's going to return non-nil value. So we know there's going to be no optional values inside of our array. So I'm going to say messages is going to be an array of message item, and I'm just going to say these all objects. I'm going to say give me the compact map, and compact map, and I'm just going to use the trailing closure syntax. So I know it's going to return a message snapshot in here. Snapshot in. And I'll show you what I mean. So by message snapshot or message dictionary, really what I'm referring to here is if I jump into my project, I'm referring to each one of these. So these, for example, these 3 items here, 1, 2, 3, those are the message snapshot, right? And I believe that includes this as well because that's the key. So that's the message snapshot. So you could think of it as like, give me, nope, I don't want to delete data. But anyways, give me this, give me this, give me this. Those are the snapshot and those are key value pairs, right? So message snapshot, what do I want to do with the message snapshot? I'm going to create a message dictionary. It's going to be message snapshot and it's going to be value. And like I said, I know the value is going to be a string to any key value pairs, which is just a dictionary. And I'm going to neo coalesce it to an optional dictionary, to an empty dictionary. Okay, so now that I have my message dictionary, I can go right ahead and create a message. I'm going to say message is of type message item. And remember, message item have these, what do we call it? They have this dictionary initializer. If I command and click into a message item, we have this dictionary parameter here. And we are decoding each property that comes into that belongs to that dictionary, that exists inside of that dictionary here. And that dictionary, again, is just this. This is an entire dictionary, right? And then we have a key of owner UID, we have the value, we have a key of timestamp, we have the value. And in here, we're saying, where is our owner UID? We say, this is the owner UID. We say, use this owner UID key to get that value. So we're doing that decoding in here inside of this initializer block. Now let's jump back to our message service. So what that means is we could just directly pass this message dictionary into this dictionary parameter for our message item, right? And then it's asking us if it's a group chat message. Very simple. A channel has a group chat computer property. So we can say channel.isGroupChats, okay, which is perfect. And again, remember, if we command and click into this group chat, channel items have this is group chat computer property that we created a while ago and we're using in our project. And so now it's asking us for an ID. Can anybody guess what the ID is? Well, if we go to the Firebase console, this is our message IDs, right? This one's right here, for example. So this is the channel ID. These are the message IDs because if you expand them, they contain the message values that we want. So the way we're just going to do that is this message snapshot, the key. They have a key property, right? Which if you think about it, that's the key for each of this item, right? So, I mean, not this one, and this one, and this one. So it's perfect. So we have our message item. Let's jump back to our message service. We have our message item and let's go right ahead and actually assign our message sender. Remember, we're doing this message sender thing a couple of episodes ago. So I'm just going to copy that, that property right there. And I'm going to paste it here and I'm going to say message.sender because we need to know who sent the message is this message sender, which is perfect. All right, so the next thing we want to do now is what? We're just going to go right ahead and return our message. So right here, this messages is going to give us the array of, let's say, for example, if this page size is 12, if we're asking for 12 items, it's going to give us an array of 12 messages, which is perfect. Now that we have our messages, I'm just going to go right ahead and sort them in such a way that, the latest messages are going to be at the bottom and the oldest messages are going to be at the top. And, we have this sort functionality with a timestamp. Messages have timestamp, so I'm going to use the shorthand $ syntax, $0. I'm going to say timestamp, sorted in such a way that, again, the newer messages are going to be at the bottom of the screen and the oldest messages are going to be at the top. That's what we're just doing with this sort logic here. And with that set up, we're getting a bunch of errors. Let's see, what are we doing wrong here? Children, yeah, we have everything we need. Okay, let's continue. Let's try to fill out this logic first. So the next thing I want us to do now is I'm just going to say if the messages the count is equals to our main snapshot view, main snapshot the children count, because this main snapshot has a children count, this main snapshot that we get back. So it's perfect. And if we have that, that means we've already fetched all the 10 item or whatever the page size is. And now I'm going to just go right ahead and create a message node. I'm just going to say let message node is equals to message node. And let's go right ahead and open this up. And I'm just going to say messages. And the current cursor is, for the initial one, it's going to be nil. So let's just pass in nil for now. Or let's just pass in first.key. First.key. Okay. And let's go right ahead and return our message node. And are we getting an error there? Message node, that should not be an error. Let's go right ahead and complete this really quickly. For the completion, inside of the error block, I'm just going to return an empty node if for whatever reason there was an error. And I'm going to put this above the completion block. So let's go right ahead and remove the spacing and let us run our project and try to figure out why we are getting this error. Because sometimes we have this Firebase errors and okay, that seems not to be an issue. Well, that seems to be an issue. So what are we doing wrong here? We have our Firebase, we have main snapshot, we have children, again, children, right? We have all of our objects. What are we doing wrong here? If I try to fix that, that is incorrect. Nope. Let me command and clean my project. Command Shift and K. Clean. Okay, I think what's going on here is a syntax error. Let's make sure we're not writing anything wrong. Oh, yeah, I think I'm using the wrong syntax. This is a timestamp with a capital S. That looks good. What else? Also, we can't return a message node because remember, this is a completion handler signature, not an async await. So I need to use the completion here. I'm just going to say completion, and I'm going to pass in the message node when we're done. So let's go right ahead and run our project, and everything should compile. That's awesome. Okay, I'm going to stop the simulator because there's really nothing to show yet. All right, so this essentially fetches the initial batch for our messages. I would like for us to write out the logic that is going to do the actual, pagination for more items. So what I mean is when we scroll to the top here and we pull down, we need another logic inside of this message service that's going to do that next round of batching. And we're going to use the same method, honestly, except we're going to add a little bit more logic to it. And here's what I mean. I'm going to go right up here and I'm going to create a query. So instead of assigning the query right up here, let's comment that out. I'm just going to say this query is going to be of type database query. Yep. And I'm going to say if last cursor is equals to nil, if the last cursor is equals to nil, I'm going to say the query is equals to this query right here, which is the initial fetch. So this helps us get this logic essentially determines, are we making the pagination? Let me go into the simulator. Are we making the initial fetch? Are we fetching for the first time? So what I mean is, if I jump into this My Besties channel, this is the initial fetch, because in this initial fetch, there is no last cursor or current cursor yet, because it's the initial pull that we are making. So when we do that, the query is just going to be saying, okay, query limited to this batch size. And if that's not the case, if we've already done the initial pooling, the next set of pooling, let's make the query a little more sophisticated. So I'm going to use the same Firebase logic, the Firebase constant, messages ref, except I'm going to add a little bit more thing here. I'm going to say query ordered by key. This is going to order our query. And I'm going to say query ending. It's going to ask for a value, and the value is going to be the last cursor. And then I'm going to say the query limited to, to last, and I'm going to say page size. And essentially what I'm doing here is when we do this, when we go to our, into our node, I'm saying, hey, give me, organize this, when I make this query, organize this keys accordingly, because these keys are actually generated by timestamp, this child by auto IDs. So I'm saying organize these keys accordingly, right? That's what the query ordered by key method is going to do for us. And then when it says the query ending at, so inside of our message service, this query ending at, it's asking us where do we want to stop the query. So I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, 4. For example, if the last cursor is this, I'm going to say stop it right here, right? And the number, what determines the number of messages that we're going to get is this page size, int. So let's jump back to Xcode and let's continue with our business. So now I'm going to remove this comment. The observe single event logic is going to remain the same. And honestly, the only other thing that I'm going to change now is inside of our messages count, inside of this completion handler, before we fire this completion handler, we need to add a little bit more logic as well. So I'm going to say, we need to say, let filtered messages. Well, you know what? This is not going to make sense until we actually display it. So let us stop this right here. I think this video is already getting a little bit longer. In the next episode, let us take this get historical messages method, plug it into our chat room view model, and use that to actually fetch messages. And then we're going to come back and wrap up this get historical messages logic. Thank you for watching as always, guys. I really appreciate the support. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.